With each new generation, we have lowered our expectations for teenagers. Did you know that up until 1921, the word teenager didn't even appear in Webster's dictionary? I learned that in this book, and today is going to be an uncomfortable, paradigm-challenging Facebook Live that I hope every single parent listens to. What we're going to share with you from this book, and then what Travis and I are going to do our best to expound upon, is something so troubling that's happening in today's youth culture, not just sports, but it's happening in sports too, where we are normalizing something that's not actually normal. So, I'm going to open up by reading this little portion from a book called Stepping Up by Dennis Rainey. Listen to this. Did you know that the word teenager didn't appear in the dictionary until 1921? Until 1921. Up until the 1900s, most of the world's population thought of people in two categories, children or adults. But because of the need for help around the home, the farm, family, business, children were raised to become fully functioning grown-ups by the time they reached 13 or 14. Now you might be thinking to yourself, I don't know any 13 or 14-year-old that is a fully functioning grown-up. I'm going to argue with you that it's our fault. As youth influencers, the people who are the ones in charge of influencing our youth, is it not our fault that children don't become fully functioning adults at age 13 or 14? It's an interesting question. I continue. But with the Industrial Revolution, labor reform, and mandated education early in the 20th century, a gap began to open up between childhood and adulthood, leaving a space of several years to be filled in with new, imaginative possibilities. Over the past 5 decades, adolescence has become a full-blown life stage and a cultural phenomenon. With each new generation, as I mentioned, we've lowered our standards and our expectations for our teenagers. Today, most people in our culture believe that adolescence is a time when young men should have all kinds of freedom. Young men and women should have all kinds of freedom and fun. They're expected to rebel, experiment with risky choices, play games, look at pornography, have sex, and generally get into trouble. We expect teenagers to continue acting like children. As Alex Harris writes in his blog, we expect immaturity and irresponsibility from teenagers, and that is exactly what we get. It goes on to talk about how a lot of observers have found that there's a lot of teenage men or teenage boys who have taken adolescence well into their 20s and 30s. Instead of behaving like men, they continue to behave like boys for a lot of different reasons. And so I'm going to stop there and Travis and I are going to talk on just the idea as influencers of youth, the leaders who are responsible for casting a vision for our kids, casting a vision for our teens, for our young men, for our young women, for our youth athletes. We're responsible for casting a vision better than what they could ever imagine for themselves. Are we not responsible for getting them to realize it's not normal that I'm feeling the way I'm feeling all the time? It's not normal that I'm comparing myself to everybody. It's not normal that I feel anxious before sports games. It's not normal that I'm making these choices, or that at 16, 17 years old, I'm still acting like a little child. I think that there's a balance there personally. I'm going to let you chat on it for a second. I think there's a balance of what we can do better. Me personally, Travis, as people that work with kids, hundreds of them every week, we're trying to figure out how can we help them become better people, not just better athletes. And I think this is a big part of it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's certainly a fine line to walk. He's going to be able to meet the kids where they're at without putting up barriers that are going to make them shut down from you. Too many times our expectations are going to dictate the route they go. So if we normalize certain activities, normalize certain things, then they're going to assume they're normal. They're normal to do, right? So there's that one study of the teacher who goes into the first day of class, and she has a very, very difficult group of students. And she gets their locker numbers, and she thought that was their IQ, right? So she taught them like they were that IQ. And that class actually outperformed the other ones, and they were the ones that were labeled as the troubled kids. But her expectation and how she went about teaching them brought the best out of them. So it just shows how our expectations are going to trickle into the ones that we are influencing.
I think we do need to pause. Parents, coaches, we need to pause and think to ourselves, if we continue coaching, leading, parenting the way that we are currently coaching, leading, and parenting, allowing the things to happen that we're allowing to happen, normalizing the things that aren't really normal, what does that path look like when my kid, my athletes, my players are 25? You know, if I continue on the path that I'm on as far as normalizing these behaviors, you know, this guy, I mean, I think the quote is perfect. We expect immaturity and irresponsibility from teenagers, and that is exactly what we get. I mean, I think about it in terms of business. You know, I think when at PFP, when we hold our team members here to a higher standard, we are by default telling that team member that we believe they could be more. We hold them to a higher standard and then they rise to that standard, rather than justifying and normalizing and looking at other people and the way they run their businesses and saying, oh, well, you know what, they let their coaches do that, so we're just going to do that with our coaches too. You can probably come up with your parallels in your work environment, but don't we all want to be held to a higher standard because we know it feels good that somebody believes we can be more? Inspiration, I don't think all parents or coaches believe that they are inspirational people for their kids, but inspiring is just getting a kid to believe in more than they believe in themselves, right? Getting a kid to believe in themselves more than they did before. So when I think about what we could do better as coaches, as parents, as youth influencers, inspiration and holding them to a higher standard and creating better expectations. I think, again, we do a great job of creating high expectations for our kids on the sports field. I mean, our kids feel that. They feel the need to rise up to the standard on the sports field, but it's not always because the parent or the coach sets it. It's because their peers set it and they compare them to one another. But I don't think we set the high enough standard and expectation for a young man or woman's character, who they could become. I think we set it for their statistics and for on-field performance, and even in classroom performance, we expect them to be straight A students or whatever it is, but we don't do it with their character.
Yeah, and it's just an area that I think the beautiful thing about life is everything kind of does parallel each other. So you can teach these character lessons through sport. You can teach these character lessons through academia. But the big thing is you got to make sure that you draw the comparison so you can show how efforts in one area should be applied to other areas with goal setting and a strategic approach to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess one last thing that I'll add is observe the behaviors and actions and words that your kid says about themselves. Observe those things, and you will quickly find what they believe is expected of them and what they believe the standard is. You don't have to ask them, you know, little Johnny, what do you think my expectation of you is? Do you think that I expect you to become a fully functioning adult by 13 or 14? You don't have to ask them. You can just watch. And if your 16 or 17-year-old is running amok and they're living lives that are counter to what you believe is possible for them, it's probably because that's the expectation they believe has been placed on them. And they're just living up to it, or living down to it rather. So again, a quick Facebook Live, a rather uncomfortable one because I think that all of us have room to grow as youth influencers here. We talk about love-powered leadership in PFP. What does a love-powered coach or a love-powered parent look like? Man, it's one that doesn't think that their kids' behaviors are normal, but one that holds their team to a high standard because they believe they could be more than they're currently being. That's all I've got today, guys. Do you have anything to add?
No, I think it's a good one.
The book Stepping Up by Dennis Rainey. It is a book about manhood technically, but the principles apply for young men or young women, and I think it's one that any influencer could benefit from picking up. So guys, thanks so much for watching this live. We appreciate you and your time, and any questions you guys have or any topics that you would like to hear us babble on about or find some good information on, ask us, because that's what we do. We go seek the information and then give it back to you guys. Thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks, guys.